Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mark Loeffler Experience. We got Aaron and Ariana on. These guys are the masters of Airbnb. They took a single family home that they rented, turned that into a 7-figure Airbnb business. I should say a 7-figure Airbnb empire. They're just getting started. I can't wait to hang out with them and learn some nuggets so I can increase my Airbnb business. You won't want to miss this one. Check it out. You guys are the kings of Airbnb now. Kings and queens.
That's kind of what we're known for, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. How do you guys start a 7-figure Airbnb business?
I've always been very enamored with cash flowing real estate. So that was kind of how we started our journey. But, with Ontario real estate prices being where it's at and the rental rates not really keeping up with the appreciation of real estate, we started looking at alternative methods to start cash flowing with the investments that we purchased. So we kind of turned to Airbnb to get started with that. And we found that the margins and the revenue being offered through short-term rentals offers a lot more benefit for us and our return on time. And that's kind of how we got started doing short-term rentals.
Yeah, what was your first Airbnb?
The first one that we did was we just rented a house, a large house. We created an extra 3 bedrooms to make it into a 10-bedroom home. And then we ended up mostly room renting most of the bedrooms. And the only reason we turned to Airbnb was because we had 2 large bedrooms that were not being rented on for long term, and that's why we turned towards Airbnb.
Because each room was renting for $1,000 a month in Toronto. The 2 largest bedrooms we wanted to get $1,300, but nobody wanted to pay $1,300.
Right.
So we were kind of at this midpoint where we weren't getting the rents we wanted, and the people who were interested in the rooms didn't want to pay the kind of rents we're looking for. So we turned to Airbnb thinking okay, well, why not give it a shot? We've got 2 rooms that are sitting vacant, so we may as well try to do something rather than just sitting on vacancy, right?
We didn't really know exactly what to expect either. It was just, let's give it a try. If it doesn't work, then we'll go back to the room rentals, but let's at least try it out and see how it goes.
Just tell me quickly, what was that like? So you were getting you were asking $1,300, you weren't getting out of these 2. What did you make on your first month Airbnb-ing these?
On our first month Airbnb, so we started Airbnb those units in April. And so it was kind of spring, summer. We were bringing in anywhere from $2,000 to $2,500 per room. So we had 2 of those rooms. In that first year, I don't know, I think we made
well, I think it averaged out to about $2,000 a month per room. And that was throughout the busy season and the off season in the winter. But yeah, it pretty much evened out to $2,000 a month per room.
You basically doubled your revenue.
That was kind of our light bulb moment. And we're oh crap, we're really onto something here, right? Because we weren't too sure, because the house that we were renting out, it wasn't really close to any subway stations, and nearby there weren't any shops. It was kind of
just a residential area,
a quiet neighborhood road, right? So we're kind of in doubt at first about how would Airbnb work here, but we quickly realized that there was a lot of demand for short-term rentals, and we realized that we were kind of onto something special here, especially with Ontario the landlord-tenant laws being where they're at. And, landlords being kind of stripped of their power and their control over what they can do with the units once they're signed off on the lease, right? So we're thinking okay, well, if there's a way to regain the control over our units and still cash flow almost 2 times or even up to 3 times a month in certain months, it was kind of a no-brainer, honestly.
So you guys rent hack. You rented this house personally. You rented out rooms, and then you Airbnb'd some of them as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
What were you paying for rent?
We were paying $5,800.
Yeah.
$5,800. So those 2 Airbnbs basically covered your rent.
Yes.
Almost, yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
Right. And then you made cash flow from the other rooms, and then obviously you more than lived for free. When was the last time you guys had full-time jobs? That's what I really want to know here.
2 years
2
now.
years?
I think 2 full years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when was that house rent hacking?
So we were still working working full time when we started that house and when we started Airbnb.
I think the lease started in 2018 or early 2019.
Yeah.
So 4 years ago.
Yeah, pretty much.
Do you guys still have that rental? And we still
have it.
Yes.
Yeah. The landlord loves it because it's no longer a concern of his. We pay the rents, we take care of the property.
We actually it was a vacant home for so long, and then we actually turned it into a nice, warm, welcoming home. So they appreciated that, and we take care of it more than they were ever taking care of it. So
yeah,
and you still Airbnb it by the room.
We do, yeah.
Yes, we do.
Amazing. What's the total revenue on that now? That's what
the total revenue is around like 11,000 a month. So, it's kind of slowed down a little bit because of COVID and just like Airbnb regulations where they're at in Toronto. Like we kind of like to do midterm rentals rather than short-term rentals. So we like to book it out on a monthly basis. So with that said, obviously we're kind of sacrificing a little bit of the cash flow, but what we get is very consistent people who are booking for a few months at a time, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
What are the next steps along the way, and what were some of the failures and what were some of the major successes?
Well, when we started, we were still working our full-time jobs, and then when we realized that this was kind of holding us back, we decided to quit our jobs and just dive deep into Airbnb and real estate. So our next thing was we purchased another duplex that was already an Airbnb that we sort of just took over. It was super turnkey. So that was a very easy way for us to get into the Kitchener market. And then we slowly started to build on that. So then that was kind of what really started our real estate journey. And we started buying. We went on a buying spree after that.
We went through like a lot of JVs and a lot of strategic partnerships to kind of grow our portfolio. I think one of the biggest challenges early on in our journey was the fact that we were kind of like wearing way too many hats in the business. So not only were we taking care of like guest reservations, replying to inquiries and taking on like reservations and all that stuff, but we're also cleaning the units as well. And when you're scrubbing toilets, and sometimes like you have 2 units that are being turned over on the same day, and you have a full-time job, it's kind of like you start sweating buckets because you're like, okay, well, I got to be at my job, plus I have to do this. So like we've quickly realized that trying to do all parts of the business alone, like just simply doesn't work. And that's kind of why we started to systemize the business early on. And I think that's one of the biggest things we took away from that experience was that if you build a strong enough team that can take care of the multiple aspects of the business, like you can grow so much quicker, so much faster, and like the business will run a lot more smoothly.
So what are some of the key systems in your business right now?
For us, I mean, we kind of break it down in terms of all the roles that everyone has to play. So we have our cleaners, we have our on-site managers. So those would be people who would be repairing things, maintaining the property. We have our guest communications, which are usually our VAs. We now recently hired a vice president, a VP of operations.
And he kind of handles everything like day to day, making sure that all departments are moving smoothly and that any issues with guests get resolved pretty quickly. So we've kind of taken a backseat from the business and we're not really involved in day to day. And nowadays we're more involved in like trying to expand and grow our portfolio and trying to get more listings live. And even like getting a listing live, Ariana was the one who was furnishing everything, and we're there with IKEA boxes, hammering stuff away, screwing in nails, like setting up all the furniture. But now we have set up teams, we have a design team, we have housekeeping team, the on-site management team, a customer service team, and then we have a nice VP of operations that kind of takes care of all of that, everything.
Right. So you went from one house to now the duplex. What was that, like 6 months later or so?
That was about a year later.
A year later, okay.
Yes.
And then you went for the duplex, and then fast forward another 6 months. How many more properties did you have after that next 6 months?
I don't really know exactly where we were after 6 months, but like now we're at about 40 listings.
40 listings, okay.
Yeah, we took a backseat in September just because like she was pregnant and we kind of wanted everything to run, on autopilot. But now we're aggressively expanding again, and so we have a baby now. Yeah,
yeah.
And
congratulations.
So it's funny. It's that during my whole pregnancy, we were very busy, so we were growing pretty quickly. We wanted to take on as many projects as we could while I could still move. And then the last month was sort of taking a step back and thinking, okay, we have to systemize more because once the baby's here, we won't be able to.
You're not going to be
dedicate a lot
staging
of our
properties,
time.
right? So
Exactly. So that's when we kind of decided, okay, let's take a real big look at our business and see where we need to systemize more of. And now that we've done that, we have a lot more time to expand and think about big picture stuff. And then now our day-to-day operations is all handled by our staff.
based on your current staff levels, how many more properties could you add to that business without stressing them, do you think?
We'll be adding about 12 more listings in the next month. So honestly, I'm not too sure, but I think we can do anywhere from 10 to 20 listings per month without a problem.
Amazing.
But as we grow, we're always onboarding more people. So we're not too concerned about, where our bottleneck is. We just know that the more units we get, the more our team will have to grow. And that's just what we'll have to do.
And if Aaron has to go scrub a toilet, he has to go scrub a toilet, right?
Exactly. I'm still
Worst
down.
case scenario.
I mean, obviously people out there, they might not have done any Airbnbs or anything. So if they were new getting into this, what is your biggest recommendation? Where do they find the deal? Do they buy? Do they rent hack? Do they arbitrage? What do you suggest? What are you seeing out there?
I think the quickest way to get in is just get in as whichever way possible, whether it's through arbitrage or buying a property, or let's say you have a primary residence and you have a basement with an in-law suite, right? I recommend just diving deep and getting started, because if you don't understand what goes on in the operations, you're not going to understand how to systemize it either. So a lot of people kind of sit on the sidelines thinking hey, what do I have to learn? Is there a book? Is there a magic formula that I have to follow? But honestly,
analysis paralysis. Yep.
Yeah.
And they want to see what's the secret algorithm to getting bookings and stuff. But honestly, man, you just got to start. Nothing beats execution, because break things and move fast, right?
Learn along the way.
That's my motto. We've always kind of taken that approach.
I'm the same way. Make more mistakes than anybody else and make them quicker, and then just learn from them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
40 listings. What's your monthly revenue at now?
Right now we're at about 140,000 a month.
Yeah.
140,000 a month. And you're going to be adding 10 to 12 listings a month.
Yeah.
Yes.
And where are those listings coming from today? Where, you buying them? Are you?
I would say about half of them are coming from fellow investors who purchased a property. They're well, I just spent $100,000 renovating this triplex. I don't want to just pass it on to tenants and get it trashed a month later. I want someone who will actually take care of the property and pay the rent on time. So I would say about 40 to 50% of our new listings are arbitraged. And it's just through word of mouth. Honestly, a lot of investors approach me and say, hey, listen, I got, XYZ property in Hamilton or, Windsor or something coming up. Would you be interested in taking it on? And we'll take it on. And the other 50 to 60% would be projects that we purchase ourselves or with partners, and we put on Airbnb as they come live.
So do you want to do 17 units in Edmonton that I have, that I'm renovating right now?
Sure, why not?
That'll be a discussion for another time, I think.
Fair enough. To be honest, when I was 20 years old, that's what I rented an apartment, and I rented out the rooms, and I basically lived for free. Right, which you guys did to the next level, obviously. I wasn't thinking as big as you, obviously. What's the one thing that they should do to understand a little bit about that market?
Are you referring to the homework you should do beforehand before getting the first listing live?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in that sense, what I would do is I would go on Airbnb itself and look at local listings as a traveler. And that's going to kind of give you an idea of what does the supply look like, and what do the listings actually look like themselves, right? And what I would do is I would look at different dates. So maybe try to see, okay, well, what's available today, maybe a week from now, a month from now, 2 months from now, what does the supply look like, right? And you're going to see the number of listings kind of change the longer you put it out. So you'll kind of get an idea of, okay, well, there's this many listings and there's this much demand, because, today there's not much supply left. Whereas if you look maybe 2 months from now, there may be 100 listings available, right? So that's going to give you a rough idea of the supply and demand of the market and how much they're charging. Yeah, I would start with just kind of diving deep into your local market to see what is possible, right? And also a quick Google search, Toronto Airbnb regulations will let you know that if you were to start an Airbnb in Toronto, you're faced with a lot of hurdles and regulations that push back on the Airbnb hosts, because quite frankly, they don't want short-term rentals here.
And it seems like a very obvious point to do that, but I feel like a lot of people do miss out on what the regulations are and what kind of, I don't know, cities or things like that you should avoid. You could really save a lot of money by doing that little quick Google search.
But wouldn't that give an opportunity as well? Because if you can, again, I have friends in Orlando and they are doing, again, they have the same regulations. It's 1 month minimum rentals, and they rent to nurses and doctors coming into the hospital there for 3 months. And because obviously nobody else is really doing Airbnb there because it's not allowed, they almost have a captive audience.
I would agree. In Toronto, it's still possible to do it. And let's say we were living in a bungalow with like a walkout basement, then I would definitely still do Airbnb, but maybe I wouldn't open it up to short-term reservations. I would kind of do it on a monthly basis, just because that's gonna allow you to kind of work around the regulations that Toronto has imposed. But it's all about kind of knowing what the rule parameters are and what kind of strategies you can implement based on those rules, right?
I mean, the worst thing that you'd want is you're doing short-term rentals and you're doing, 2-night, 3-night bookings, and the city comes after you, and you have to pay a big fine. So as long as you know your regulations and know within what kind of bounds you can play within, then you're good to go.
Yeah, and I'm sure you want to have a backup plan too, right? Because you guys were Airbnb-ing stuff in Toronto, and then they lowered the boom, and you guys pivoted to more medium-term rentals, right?
Correct.
Right.
So that is the other alternative. If, like, say you're in Kitchener and that happens, right, or Windsor, wherever you're really doing this, and so you do always have a backup plan. And I guess if you're arbitraging and it really just goes to crap, you can just say, we're giving our 60 days notice, right?
Yeah, or you could even put it up as like a furnished rental, right?
There's still that margin there,
because you are allowed to sublet it. So you could turn around, and if your rent is like, say, $1,500 a month, put it up on like Facebook Marketplace and be like, hey, who wants a furnished rental in Windsor for like $1,750?
And I guess being in Ontario, your rent's not going to go up very much every month. So every year you have it, it's getting cheaper and cheaper, and you keep getting more because inflation and costs are going up, right?
Right.
Exactly.
That's a huge benefit. What else do you want to tell everyone out there? What else should everyone know before we sign off?
Play where the rules favor you best. I say that because I see a lot of investors in Ontario who are building these large portfolios, and they're renting to long-term tenants, and they're leaving a lot of potential money on the table. And there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, if they want to do long-term rental, that's fine. But I just feel like the rules and I guess the parameters and boundaries that landlords can really play on in Ontario are so restricted that you kind of want to play in an area where you have the element of control over your investment, right? Because ultimately, when you're investing large sums of money, you want to have control, right? Because if you don't have control over your units, then what are you really doing, right? So I would highly advise, like, Airbnb is not scary. It just kind of takes some time of getting used to it. And, it's more of a business, and sure, there's a lot more moving parts, but ultimately at the end of the day, you're going to get a lot more control and a lot more revenue for your investment.
Well, it definitely is more active, right? It's not like you guys retired from a job and retired to own a business, right?
Right.
Thanks so much for taking time away from the baby. I'm glad, we got during nap time. And thanks so much again for coming on. We certainly appreciate it. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, we'll definitely, we'll drop your Instagram down at the bottom here. So reach out to them. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.